yoga class, we're gonna do a nice, easygoing, delightful practice. I'm gonna do a lot of shoulder stuff. We'll have love for the whole body, but we'll do quite a bit of shoulder work. Starting with a pose that lets the shoulders open. So the question you have to answer for yourself is, what kind of props do I want to use to create this little shoulder opening? So I'm going to do this with a blanket this morning because it's a pretty straightforward, and most people have a blanket, so hopefully you do as well. So this is just a simple, cotton blanket, and I've folded it twice at this point. So it's folded in half lengthwise and then in half crosswise. And then I'm going to fold it one more time crosswise so that if I hold this up, it'll cover me most of the way down my spine, okay? And so you just want to make sure whatever size blanket you're using, that you fold it so that it's pretty much the length of your spine, including supporting your head. Then we're going to roll it. So you can roll it up in a tight cylinder, and that will give you a much firmer support. I like to do it, so I fold it about 4 or 5 inches over, and then just keep folding it on that 4 or 5 inch line. And then what I wind up with is a little bit flatter and wider structure, and it feels a little bit less abusive. Gives me what I'm looking for, but it's also a little bit kinder to the general shape of my spine and my body. So I'm going to lay this down on the mat. I'm going to put the bottom edge of this blanket about at the bottom of my rib cage, maybe just a little bit lower than that, but I'm not going to bump it up right against my hips. You can. I just find that my low back doesn't always come around at the exact same height as a blanket, or you can use a bolster if you've got one of those as well, or a couple yoga blocks, a pillow, whatever you may have. So whatever you've got to put under your back, just make sure that your low back is happy with the choice, okay? Now, I'm going to extend my legs out in a minute, but to start with, I'm going to leave my feet on the ground, and then as I roll myself down, I have a little bit more opportunity to sort of move my hips by doing that. Now, if I wanted my head a little higher, I could take the blanket and kind of fold it in, so that it gives me a little bit of a lip to have my head a little higher. That's actually kind of pleasant. I think I might stick with that. And I've got the bottom of the blanket right about just below my last rib there, my little floaty rib. So I've got my pelvis and my low back pretty well able to just do whatever natural curve feels good. Now if I extend my legs out and I feel that pull me too deep into the back bend, then I may want to go up a little higher, or you may want to leave your feet on the floor. Okay, so that's up to you. I'm finding myself, so just double checking that I'm about even. My shoulder blades are about at the same touching point on the blanket underneath me. And then my arm is allowed to go over the lip, right? So the shoulder is going to get the release here. If my arms are, I'm not going to hold them close against me. Essentially, I just like hold them up and then let them fall to the floor. And if I do that, then the movement here is very deep in the shoulder stabilizers. There's not a lot of sensation. I won't feel the stretch so much, but it is it's a more postural realigning kind of thing to do. If I take my arm way out to the side, then I get a lot of sensation, and especially in the chest muscle, the pectoralis major. But it's a little less work on the shoulder stabilizers. So I get more chest emphasis, a little less shoulder stabilizer emphasis. So depending on what you want to do, I go for the lower sensation and deeper movement by putting the arms in a little closer. And that way, I'm kind of correcting my posture. I spend a lot of time these days leaning over a computer or working on a sewing machine, and so that moves my shoulders forward, so this allows them to fall back where they belong. So we're going to stay like this for a few minutes, let's say another 3 minutes or so. Just allowing ourselves to relax. Now, place yourself in a position that feels appropriate and receptive. If I feels like you're tensing up or tightening around and trying to protect yourself, use other props or move a little bit differently. Again, you can adjust the legs, adjust the head. And then we're going to try to relax around the eyes so that the eyes themselves get a little deeper in the socket. Temples and the little muscle that goes right around the ear from the temple relaxes. I'm going to allow the eyes to become kinder so that our gaze out into the world, whether it's an actual gaze or a metaphoric gaze, is one of receptivity and kindness. Relax the muscles around the jaw and let the lips get a little softer. And we're unwinding what might be a kind of armoring around the chest as well. And sometimes this happens because we physically position our body that way, and sometimes the armoring happens because we feel like we need to protect ourselves in some fashion, deep in the nervous system. And so we're allowing the nervous system to release that pattern and become receptive. More breaths here. Reach my arms up over my head and just stretch from fingertips to toe tips. Oh, and I'm going to grab hold of this blanket. And so once I roll to the side, I can just pull that out pretty easily. And then come on back onto your back and notice what may have occurred. So usually my first thing that I notice when I use a blanket is that there's a sense almost that that blanket is still there. There's like a little impression left behind. And that feels really interesting. But the thing that's most interesting to me is that it now feels like my shoulder is rolling backwards into the floor. And usually when I first lay down on the floor in the morning, if I'm doing yoga, or, you know, whatever, generally speaking, I get on the floor when I'm doing yoga. But my shoulder feels like it's slightly forward rolling, right? So there's a lot of muscular tension there. So I'm just noticing that sense of the shoulder kind of returning to the floor, the top part of the shoulder, and that feels really nice. And notice if that's true for you. Sometimes, especially if this pattern is really deeply wound in, we have to stay a little bit longer with a pose like that to help unwind all of that muscular tension in the deep stabilizers of the shoulder. All right, so we're gonna position the body so that the legs are bent like we're gonna go into bridge. We're not, but we're we're gonna start that way with the legs. This is generally referred to as constructive rest position. Now for me, the best way is to have the knees and the feet kind of line up with the hips. For some people, it's better to have the feet a little wider and let the knees drop toward each other. That puts a lot of pressure on my hips for some reason. It makes my inner thighs shaky. So it's not the right thing for me. It creates muscular tension. But you'll want to kind of fiddle with it a little bit and figure it out for yourself. Like, where's the most stable place for your legs to rest? Now, once you've got that, then we're going to take the arms a little close to the body and down so that we're reaching towards our heels. We're going to reach towards the heels and then keep reaching through the arms through a whole range of motion. As you lift your arms, they'll go straight up towards the ceiling, and then they're going to go up and over your head. And so we're just reaching the whole way. So reaching from up over the head, back up toward the ceiling, and then back down toward the heels, still reaching the whole way. So we're going to do that 3 more times. Reaching, and it's this feeling of trying to draw the arms as far away from the center of the body as we can. So just stretching through, stretching through. And you'll feel all the muscles as you move the body through this range of motion. Different muscles will kick on as we go. Try to feel all of the feels, all of the muscles. Pretty sure I'm using that wrong, but I like it better. So still stretching through as we bring the arms back. Keep reaching. And then we got one more, so just kind of relax a little bit when you get to the floor, and then reach one more time. And stretch through the arms as best you can. So I have to keep kind of adjusting my reach as my arms change position. Keep reaching. Keep reaching. Can you feel that sort of movement in your back, movement in your shoulders? So then we're going to let the arms relax. You could do a cactus, or they could go down low. Cactus feels really good to me after that. And you can do little windshield wipers with your legs. Just release any tension you may have developed as you were working that out. So we're going to leave the left foot on the floor. We're going to put the right ankle up on top of the left thigh. And then we're going to take the arms and bring them so that they go straight up. And then grab the elbows. So whatever arm is on front, so for me the right arm is the one that landed in front when I, or towards my face when I hold this position. That I'm just going to memorize that. Okay, my right arm is in front. So I'm going to reach my arms up and overhead, and then I'm going to bring them back to that chest height position, holding onto my elbows. So I'm going to keep holding onto the elbows, and they may not make it all the way over my head or all the way to the floor. Whatever the range of motion is, and then down again, kind of toward the chest. And then keep reaching up. Beautiful, and come back. Now, we're going to grab hold, so my right arm's on top, so I'm going to grab hold of my right upper arm with my left hand, and then I'm going to pull my left arm over. Now, I happen to have my right leg on top here. You may be opposite, so I'm just going to lean my legs a little bit the opposite direction, and then come on back, okay? So I'm pulling my right arm to the left, and I'm letting my legs go a little to the right. It won't matter which leg's on top, but if it feels unstable, you can switch it. So we're going to pull across and just let the body kind of gently work with that. You can be a little closer to your chest or a little closer to your face, depending on what feels better in your shoulder. So again, I'm pulling my arm to the left, holding onto my upper arm, and my legs are going to the right a little bit to create the kind of resistance. I'm going to do it one more time. Pulling my arm to the left, letting my legs fall a little to the right. It's not an extreme movement. Okay, coming on back. Now I'm going to take my arms and give them a little shake. Everything cool out there? Okay. Now, my left arm is going to reach up above my head, and then I'm going to take my left hand towards my right knee. So I'm going to do a little bit of core work. And what I want is to feel my obliques do the work. So I have 2 choices with the right hand in this case. Now, if you've got your left leg up on top, then you might do this backwards. But I put my right hand behind my head, and then as I come up with my left arm towards that right knee, I can just leave my head resting in my hand so I won't overdo it with the neck. Or I can stretch my right arm out to the right so that as I come up towards that right side, I've got something to lean into and I can kind of press my elbow into the floor. So you can do this either way. I don't tend to overuse my neck, but if I find myself doing it, I'll switch positions and put my hand under there. So I'm going to reach with my left arm up and then come across. And I'm trying to initiate that action from my core, from my side waist, so that everything is along for the ride on that side waist. Again, you can do this with your hand behind your head. Beautiful. We're going to do 3 more of these. Reach, 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 reach in both directions. Good. We might have done 3, but let's do one more bonus round just to be sure. And then we're kind of back to the center. So hopefully you feel like there's been a little bit of a firing up of the muscle on the side waist. And so I've got this position now still with my right leg up on top. I'm going to bring my hands behind my head. And we're going to work a little bit of the core here. So again, I'm putting my hands behind my head so I don't overdo things with the neck. I'm going to press my head back into my hands. That secures my neck and it forces me to do the work from my upper and middle abdominals, this like center band here. So leaving my foot resting on the floor, I'm going to curl my shoulder blades up off the floor, keeping my head pressing back. So I really force myself to do this work from my abs. So I want that strength and structure, but I don't want my neck doing the job. Abs will often try to delegate work to the neck. Don't let it. Delegation has its place, but not in this regard. So 2 more. Beautiful. So we're going to leave the head resting. We're going to unwind that right leg, give both legs a nice big stretch out, and then if it feels all right, you can reach through your body with the arms as well. And then just pause for a moment. You can do the windshield wipers or just little back and forth jiggles. I like to feel what it is that I've done to myself. Alright, so I'm taking my left ankle, putting it up on top of the right thigh. And then I'm going to take my arms and reach straight up. And this time my left arm is going to wind up on top. And sometimes when a different arm is on top, we'll find a different range of motion is available for us. So just work with the range of motion you got. So we're going to push the elbows away from the body, bring them up so the arms come up toward going over the head. It might not go all the way. And then keep reaching up as you bring your arms back. So I'm trying to lift my elbows into the stretch, over my head, and then back. And again, you might not make it all the way over your head, no worries. Coming up and over. I don't make it all the way down to my chest, so we work with what we got, right? So reaching up. Back, and theoretically this would touch down on the up, on your torso, but whatever. Reach up and over, and then come backward and do that one more time. Reach the elbows up and over, and then come back. Now I'm going to grab my upper left arm with my right hand, kind of figure out where you want that arm to go. So I'm pulling my arm across to the right, and then I'm letting my legs gently kind of move a little to the left to counter the balance, and then coming back, letting that shoulder return all the way down to the floor. And then as I pull across, I'm trying to get kind of up in under that shoulder blade a little bit. Coming back, letting that shoulder blade snuggle all the way back into the floor. Pulling across, letting the legs kind of help me counter the balance. Coming back. One more time. So drawing the elbow over, a little movement with the legs the opposite direction, and then coming on back. I'm going to release, give my arms a little shake. Now my right arm is going to come up towards this left knee, and again I can put the hand behind the head so that as I come up I keep my head nice and steady, or I can reach out and kind of press my elbow down to the ground to provide a little bit more stability, so that as I come up I'm stabilizing this side of the body so that I have to make my sideways do the work. So reach and twist it up. reach, twist. Again, try not to lead from your head, try to lead from your side waist. Head is along for the ride. Disco moves. 2 more. And then we're going to bring the hands behind the head. Relax the neck as much as possible. Press the head into your hands. Curl up and come back down. Curl up and come back down. Try to feel yourself really choosing the abdominal work. You really aren't trying to go very far. Maybe at most the shoulder blades come off the ground, but if it's just the upper part of the back, that's fine too. Just curl as much as it makes sense to curl. 2 more. Okay, you can release the legs. Do little windshield wipers or stretch the legs all the way out. And do a little release there. Now we're going to do a shoulder opener that is going to start laying on our belly. And it is meant to be a stretch from the front of the shoulder and a little bit into the pec minor, but not, we shouldn't feel it necessarily in the elbow, and if it feels like it's kind of, if it's a little too deep in the joint, we're going to play with our arm, okay? So we want to try to get the sensation right at the front part of the shoulder, kind of armpit to the front of the shoulder area, top of the shoulder area. Okay, so we're going to roll into the belly. My left arm is going to go out to the side, okay? So I'm going to reach that out beside me, and I'm going to lower it a little lower than my shoulder and flip my palm upside down. So my palm faces the ceiling. Then I'm going to take my right leg and roll this over top. Okay, so I'm putting my right leg on the floor over on the left. I'm going to adjust my shoulder here. Now I like a little bit of head support, so I'm going to put my blanket in there. If you've got a block, that'll work too. Some people take the spare arm, in this case my right arm, over the top. I like to use it for support. So I pull my shoulder a little bit down and out, and then I let the body weight rest a little bit on it. I'm not trying to really pin my shoulder to the ground. I want to just feel that stretch in the front of my shoulder. So it might be better to take the legs and just put them together instead of having the leg kicked over the top. So whatever's going to be right for you. If there's numbness or tingling, especially in these, my thumb and these first 2 fingers, try lowering the arm, because there are some nerves that run through the shoulder that if we position the arm bone in the wrong place, we'll feel the pinch. Take 2 more breaths. Now, to come out of this, I'm going to take my legs back to the center, roll back onto my belly, and I'm going all the way over. So I'm going to roll onto my right side. Now, my left arm was the one that I was just stretching, so that's the one on top. My right arm is sticking directly out to the right. My hips are stacked on top of each other, shoulders are stacked on top of each other. And I've got my legs bent so that my knees are bent. And it's almost like a chair pose, but laying on my side, okay? So then my left arm I'm going to put with my right arm. And then I'm going to take that left arm, hover it, and reach all the way up over my head, stretching all the way around, and then just bringing that arm back, okay? So reach overhead, stretch all the way around, try to feel that through the chest. Come back. So now we're taking the same notion and putting it in motion. I did not realize that was going to sound like Dr. Seuss, but that was exciting. So 2 more of those. Alright, so once we get all the way around, we're going to do this whole thing again on the other side. So I'm gonna lay on my belly. I'm gonna extend my right arm out this time. Hello. Got a friend right here, so let's see what she does. She's a very old ferret. She's 8, which is old for a ferret. So sometimes I like to indulge her. So anyway, I'm gonna stick my right arm out. My fingers, my palm is face up. And then I'm just gonna lower that a little lower than my shoulder. Take my left leg, come up and over the top. I'm gonna position my head, with some support under it so I can just rest that. Before I get all the way over, I'm moving my arm bone into position. So I feel that in my chest. And again, you can put the foot on the ground or just put the legs together, whatever will work better. In this case, my right shoulder's a little tighter and there's some scar tissue. So I needed to do a little bit less with my hips. I'm not trying to go quite as far here. You can bend at the elbow. And again, we don't want any numbness or tingling, especially in the first 2 fingers and thumb. So that would be a red flag to move the arm bone a little bit more. So I feel a little bit of pressure, a little bit of kind of a pleasant warmth across the front of my shoulder, and that's what I'm going for. Myself to do it like I have some scar tissue in my right shoulder, so the way that I work with that is I'm pressing my arm into the floor a little bit, so for the resistance, and then I'm drawing my shoulder blade in and down a little bit into my back to create a little bit more feeling of working with that sort of natural resistance. I don't know if that's the right word. Innate, maybe. So one more big breath here. And then I'm going to come out of there. I'm going to let that shoulder kind of release. And again, I'm rolling all the way onto, this time onto my left side. Position my pillow. So the left arm is laying on the floor, sticking straight out. Or sorry, yeah, that's left arm. And my right arm is the arm that's going to do the work. I just need to make sure I'm not going to smack furniture. Oh, yeah. Hold on. I got to move forward a little bit. I start running into plants and furnishings. I know I've got to move. So I'm going to take my arm all the way overhead and come around. Okay? So reaching through the arm, letting the body move with the shoulder. So it's a little kind of baby twist. Reaching out. So we're finding that same stretchy area. Beautiful. Let's do it 2 more times. Now that I'm back, I'm going to let myself I'm going to let myself sit all the way up. After I get all the hair out of my face. All right. Oh. So hopefully your shoulders feel like they're kind of dropped a little bit, and it's a pleasant sensation there. Oh, I'm kind of digging it. So we're going to do a little bit of work for the neck. So to start with, I'm just going to make sure that my spine is nice and tall, so when I drop my chin, I'm not leaning forward. Sometimes it helps to sit up on a blanket or to put a blanket underneath the knees just to create a little bit of stability. Okay, so then once the chin is down and the spine is still doing a nice job of holding itself neutrally, we're going to roll the head around the shoulders. Now there's a tendency for me when I bring my head around for my shoulders to lift up a little bit to try to help. So I'm really trying to resist that urge. So I kind of let my head loll. Now, if there's any spots that feel extra tight, make a little note of those because we're going to come back. I want to note notice any patterns of tension I find sort of as I roll the head. So I'm going to do that one more time over this other shoulder. And then I'm even on both sides. So come on back to the center when you're even. Okay, so there's two muscles that stabilize the head on the shoulders. So again, one is the sternocleidomastoid muscle that connects the sternum, the clavicle, cleido, and the goes through the jaw, actually connects to the skull. So that muscle goes from here up to here, okay? So that is one, that muscle stabilizes the head forward. And then there's a muscle in the back that goes from the top of the shoulder blade to the back of the skull behind the ear. That's called the levator scapulae, and then that muscle stabilizes the neck backward, okay? So we're gonna play with both of those muscles on both sides. We're gonna start with the sternocleidomastoid. So we're gonna take the head backwards into a diagonal. So I've got my head going to the right diagonally, and I'm gonna take my collarbone and broaden it out and draw it down. So I'm gonna try to pull the collarbone away from this point where it lands. Now sometimes this feels quite dramatic and sometimes not so dramatic. So, but I can feel a little bit of tension right there in that muscle group. The muscles around it as well. And what I'm trying to do again is become receptive and soft. So sometimes a little teeny tiny gentle movement is helpful, and sometimes just holding the stretch is helpful. I do an experiment, see what I like. All right, now I'm going to gently return my head to the center and bring my arm out of there. And just for a moment, I'm just going to notice. A little tiny head movement is fine. It helps get a little bit of data, a little bit of awareness. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing, sternocleidomastoid on the other side. So when I feel like everything's sort of shifted back to neutral, then I'm going to let the head come over to the left diagonal, and I'm going to take this collarbone and pull that down and away. So I'm going to try to get the collarbone to depress, come down, and go backwards as I'm letting the head move in the opposite direction. Now for me, this right side tends to be a little bit more stubborn, and I like to sleep on that side sometimes. Sometimes that creates the trickiness, and then sometimes it's because I have old injuries. And so again, I'm just checking in with this little muscle area. Feeling for little tension points. A little bit of movement can be useful. Go gently. Okay, last big breath here. Finding your exhale, we can kind of let the head gently return, bring the arm back. So these muscles pull the head forward. So often, I don't know if this works this way for you, this does for me, but when I'm using my computer or even crafting or doing something like that, whatever it is I'm up to, I tend to shift my head forward to get closer. I'm using my visual sense to kind of pull myself in. And so there's a tendency for those muscles to become a little overly active. So just releasing them sometimes feels really interesting, and there's a kind of sense of even my chin dropping. So just notice what's happening for you. So sometimes it's the muscles in the back that need to have a little bit of love. So in order to get to these two muscles, again, we're going to work at the diagonal, but we're going to move the head forward in the diagonal. So I'm going to go to the left side first. So I'm taking my forehead towards the right diagonal. And then the trick is to get the shoulder blade to come down. And so you can reach the arm back or out to the side, wherever it feels helpful, but the shoulder blade moving down is the real key deal. Because again, the muscle connects the skull to the shoulder blade. So I'm trying to create space between those 2 points. And again, these are small muscles. You don't have to be aggressive. You just want to find a little sense that there's length there. Take about 3 more breaths here. Sometimes trying to feel like I'm pushing my shoulder blade into my back is helpful. Okay, so at the end of your 3rd breath, just let your shoulder relax back where it came from, and then let your head float up. And notice any change. And then we're going to do the same thing, but on the other side, when you feel that moment where it feels like you're invited to do that. Go ahead and let your forehead move to the diagonal over to the left, and then we're going to take this right shoulder blade and draw it down, slightly to the right and in. These muscles, for me, melt pretty quickly. I'm going to hold it for 3 more breaths. Okay, so then I'm going to bring my arm back, kind of lighten up on the shoulder, let my head float back up. And then I take just a moment to jiggle and move everything really gently, especially the head. We put a lot of length in those areas. Now, the reason to work this set of muscles, 4 muscles, 2 on each side, is in order to kind of return the skull to its neutral position. Why we would want to do that is because the cranial nerves that come out of this occiput region of the skull are the ones that are responsible for our ability to relax and be calm and peaceful. And when the skull is misaligned, there tends to also be a kind of tendency, especially towards that kind of freeze response, so that we tend to get into a sort of mental state where it feels like we can't progress, or we can't move forward, we can't move backward. We tend to kind of go inward or freeze, or kind of feel, the feeling might just be a kind of sense that we can't go anywhere, or that we feel stuck. And that is all a kind of physiologic response to the head being misaligned. And since we're doing a lot more stuff online these days, we might inadvertently wind up with some extra pressure on that part of our nervous system. Okay, so just a kind of note for later of how you might want to approach life. So I straightened out my legs. I'm going to give my legs a little jiggle. And then we're going to do a little bit of work for the hips. We're going to start with spinal twist. Now, I'm going to set my legs up in a Janu Shirsasana, or head to knee pose arrangement. What that means is, in the event that you needed this translated into English, is I'm going to have one leg straight and one leg bent, and I'm going to put my foot somewhere in this neighborhood over here on this leg. So I've got my straight right leg, bent left leg, and I've got my left foot kind of down by my calf. You can also pull your left foot all the way up to your thigh. That's up to you and your knee, but this is a little softer arrangement. And then I've also put a blanket up under the knee on the straight leg, and under the thigh a little bit on this other leg. So to start with, I'm just going to turn to my left side, since that's the leg that's bent. So I'm going to get a twist. Now, you could just as easily pick that knee up if you'd like. I want to keep this really soft and open. My right leg is going to want to roll to the right. So as I twist, that tends to fall. So now I'm going to pick that back up. So I'm going to turn my right toes up toward the ceiling. This makes me work my inner thigh a little bit more here, and it works my internal hip rotator, which for me is necessary because I tend to externally rotate. So strengthening that muscle is good. So by turning my toes up, bending my knee slightly, I give myself a little bit of something to do there for my hip. And then I'm twisting my rib cage around, and I haven't even really turned my head yet. So I'm just kind of feeling that twist out in my spine. And then if I want to turn my head, I can. And I'm just noticing, like, I now have extra sensitivity in my neck. So I'm going to experiment a little bit. Ooh, I like it better going forward. So I'm going to actually turn my head the opposite direction of my body. You can do it either way. Again, there's just choices in yoga. Whatever happens, happens. Not a right way or a wrong way. Unless it hurts, then that's the wrong way. I like the sensation that I'm getting in my upper back right now. There's this kind of spiraling that I feel around my shoulder blades, and turning the head the opposite direction is doing some interesting things with that for me. Just notice what's happening in your pose for you. I have to keep reminding my right leg to stay up. Those little internal rotators want to relax. Couple more breaths. Now I'm going to unwind this. I'm going to turn my head back to neutral, turn my spine out of the pose, jiggle out my right leg and let those muscles relax. It was so sensitive. All right, so I'm just going to turn a little bit to the side. So I open my shape up a little bit. So I'm still in the same position, just a little wider. And then I'm going to side bend over my right leg. So now I've got my right elbow kind of rest on my right thigh and my left arm reaching over. And you could just as easily side bend without the arm if that bothers the shoulder at all. One of the things that I've discovered for myself is if I rotate my arm a little bit inward, so my pinky finger almost points more towards the floor, that engages my latissimus dorsi muscles a little bit better, and then it's a more comfortable shoulder stretch. If I'm fighting those muscles, it kind of pinches. Just taking a couple more deep breaths here, maybe 3, maybe more than a couple. Yeah, one more will do. And then inhale and bring yourself up. And let this whole thing kind of settle itself. I'm going to straighten out the leg that was bent. Get a little movement in my rib cage. One of the things that can actually help the upper back feel freer is getting movement isolated in the ribs. You'll feel the resistance if you don't do it very often. All right, so I'm going to do the other leg. So I've bent my right leg, my left leg is now straight. I'm going to start with everything kind of together, a little bit closer aligned to the center line. Sitting up tall, I'm going to twist towards my right. And again, my left leg wants to roll outward when I do that. So I'm just going to roll it inward so I make myself do a little more work with my muscle. And I'm just playing with the twist, trying to find the right amount, sometimes lower with the hand, sometimes higher feels better to me. And then I'm just go, yeah. Do I want to move my head one direction or the other? Again, taking your awareness into the pose, into the body, doing the pose. The real thing is that it's not really about the pose, it's about the awareness that we create in the body. Sort of feeling all those little places that are getting touched by this twist. More breaths. Unwind. For just a moment, kind of feel that unwinding. Takes a few seconds. Oh. So I'm just turning myself a little more to the open side. I'm not quite ready to side bend yet, but I will be in a moment. So then when you're ready, you can side bend over. Nice big breath. And then inhaling your way up. Again, getting a little movement, especially at the ribs and that upper middle back. Oh. All right, so one more pose. We're going to finish with a symmetrical pose in this particular sequence. So we're going to take the legs out into a V, or you can do a butterfly. So this way with the feet together or with the knees wide, because the hips are going to be better in one position or the other depending on your anatomy. So you decide. Now I still like a blanket under my knees because it just keeps me from hyperextending, and I have a tendency to do that. Now, I'm kind of kicking my sit bones back behind me as I fold a little bit so that I get my pelvis aligned so that it's as far forward as it's willing to go. All of us have a different range of motion. Some people will be able to basically face plant onto the floor. Others of us, chest and belly plant anyway. Others of us are gonna find like we'll tilt forward a small amount and that'll be the end. And then still other people are gonna find they don't tilt forward at all, which might be a good reason to do the butterfly pose. But in any case, whatever is working, start with this kind of nice sense that the pelvis is wherever the pelvis goes, and then grow the spine out of the pelvis. I'm trying to find the spot that doesn't feel like a back bend, but it does feel like I'm lengthening. Now I turned my toes up, it bent my knees slightly and really engaged my quads, and that gave me a little bit more forward movement in my pelvis so I could get a little further forward here. May or may not happen for you. But you can experiment with more muscular energy and less. Just taking a really mindful, slow, gentle approach to a pose that is maybe or may or may not feel very gentle to you. This pose feels gentle to me, but it's not true for everybody. So one more big breath here. I'm going to come on out of there, and you can lean back and bend your knees, and then give yourself a little movement. Now, we're going to lie down, and we're going to do a little twist, a little reclining twist to either side. And then we're going to do Shavasana. So I'm going to set myself up for Shavasana. So I've got a blanket that I'm going to use underneath my head. And one of the things I like about the blanket under my head is that I can kind of cup it around the base of my skull, so I get a little bit of extra support. And if your hairdo or if your skull has lumpy bits, a blanket can be nice to kind of provide you with a little bit of structure. And then I'm going to use a little pillow under my legs. If you have some throw pillows or a second blanket, you can substitute those for a pillow or a bolster. Okay, so I'm going to put that there because that way it's ready for me when I'm getting to Shavasana. So we're going to lie down. And I'm going to reposition myself. And now I'm going to start with my shoulders on the blanket, and then when I get to the Shavasana point, I'm going to move the blanket so it's just underneath my head. But for a twist, it feels nice to have that little support all the way through the upper back. So we're going to bring the knees, you can leave the feet on the floor or lift the feet up. Bring the knees over to one side. Now, if you want, you can wrap the legs around each other. You can add a little pillow or a block in between. I'm just going to kind of let my legs hang out with each other. And then I'm kind of using my arms to work my upper back towards the ground. And I'm just going to extend out through my left arm. I've got my eyes right now pointing upward, but sometimes I like it better to turn my head to the left or the right, depending on which way it feels nice. Either one can be useful. Just feel it and see what you like best. just going to return the top leg first and then let the rest of my body come with. And pause there in the middle. There's a point where I sort of get permission to move to the next side from my nervous system. I don't know how to describe this very well or articulate it as well as I would like to. But there's almost a sense that like there's just a little relaxation or a little, like you ease the seat back in your car, just kind of, there's just a sense of letting go or of returning to neutral. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I'm gonna work on it, but once I feel that, then I move to the other side. Body is full of these really subtle clues, right? These little subtle. The nervous system is, I mean, if you're getting like if you know your foot's fallen asleep, that's quite dramatic. But the vast majority of stuff that happens with my nervous system is very subtle. Like it. I notice it when it's built up to a point of almost no return. So learning to get more and more refined in my awareness of my nervous system and awareness of how that impacts the physical movement of my body is really interesting to me. Maybe I will be good at it by the time I'm 100, I hope so. Still learning right now. Should we take 2 more breaths? Back to the center, and again, I'm going to take the top leg and just draw everything follows, right? So now my legs are in position pretty well for this little pillow. You can adjust, if you've got something under your legs, adjust that, and then I'm adjusting this under my head. Now here's my favorite thing. So with my hands, I'm going to grab the corners of the blanket, and I've got it underneath my skull. I'm going to use my arms to pick my skull up, but let my skull stay heavy. And then I just pull on the blanket with my arms so that it rolls my head gently side to side. And I think the reason I like this is because my massage therapist does this. But I haven't had a massage in months and months, so I'm feeling like, oh, this is the next best thing. So once I get kind of both sides, then I'm just going to put my head back down. And then I'm going to take the blanket and just cup it into that little crevice there. I don't want it to be too much blanket, just enough to make it feel like my skull has support. And then let your body find a place where everything feels receptive. So we're going to soften around the eyes, and especially the big muscle mass that lives at the temple and along the sides of the head. Let that area relax. As you become more receptive and kinder around your eyes, you might feel them almost start to twinkle. And let your mouth and your jaw relax. Face becomes open, receptive, and kind. yourselves thinking about stuff, just notice if any tension landed in your body, especially right between the eyebrows from thinking. Just return to that receptive position and notice your breath for a bit. Feel how the inhale moves downward through the body, creating a sort of sense of grounding and stability. How the exhale moves upward through the body, creating a sense of lightness. So the inhale grounds us, and the exhale lightens us up. Take a nice big breath. Let go with a big sigh. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Spread them out, wiggle them again. Do some wrist and ankles. Other direction. And then we can stretch. Bring the knees in. Oh, give yourself a back massage for the road. Now I like to lay on my side for a moment before I sit up, but you can rock up if you'd rather. So thanks for joining me for gentle yoga this morning. I feel really good. I hope you do too. Take a nice big breath and a big deep sigh. Namaste, beautiful souls.